Hare Krishna, Aniruddha Prabhu. Thank you very much for joining today for the Monks podcast.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, Prabhu. Actually, when I started my international travels, Melbourne was the first place I visited in the entire world. And every time I visited, it's been both instructive and inspirational to see how a vibrant community, which is focusing not just on one activity, but on a whole gamut of activities. You know, you have food distribution, then you have book distribution, you have beautiful deities, you have a very strong educational ethos, and a community that loves to hear and study philosophy. So across the world, if I consider outside India, among the various temples that are there, Melbourne is way among the top temples in terms of all, in terms of manifesting the multifacetedness of Krishna consciousness. And I believe that you have been there for almost 3 decades now, 3 or 4 decades as a consistent leader. So maybe you could start with how you came to how you have been associated with Melbourne project and how it has taken shape over the years.
My wife and I joined ISKCON in Melbourne in 1978, and we've served here pretty much all of our lives. When we joined, Balaram was the temple president, and Korma was the head pujari and kind of the kitchen in charge. And we were trained under their guidance and supervision. Until 1990, I became the temple president, and so have been the temple president. This year will be 32 years.
That's remarkable.
And more or less, the programs that we have at the moment, many of them are what was here when we joined. And certainly when I became the temple president, we had 2 restaurants. We had a very strong deity worship program. Melbourne is unique in that it's a Prabhupada Tirtha. And so we've just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the installation of our little Radha and Krishna, and installed by Srila Prabhupada. And next year we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the installation of Radha Vallabha. And they were installed in a different location. And in 1975 is the 50th anniversary of our Gauni Thai and the current temple at 197 Dank Street in Albert Park. So we're fortunate in that we have deities established by Srila Prabhupada. Jagannath, Balaram, Subhadra, Prabhupada went on their Rath Yatra. Prabhupada attended their Rath Yatras. And so it's a well-established deity worship program. But then in the last 30 years, we've expanded our congregation. So, we have, I'd say, 400 initiated disciples of about 23 or so, 20 plus gurus initiating here, or, have initiated disciples here. A lot of volunteers. An example, Christmas Marathon, 130 devotees distributed books. And of those, we've only got 3 or 4 that are actually brahmachari book distributors, single, 125, I suppose, 126 of those book distributors, all volunteers from the congregation. Our kitchen our kitchen cook roster, the WhatsApp group has 120 or 130 people on it. So we've got a very active and vibrant community, and 5 Bhakti Shastri courses running at the moment, streams. 2 Bhakti Vaibhav courses, 1 Bhakti Vedanta and 1 Bhakti Sarvabhauma course running at the moment. So there's quite, and also the farm. We've got a farm farm retreat facility basically. We've got a herd of 26 cows. We're milking at the moment. So yeah, a lot going on. 3 restaurants.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay, let's break that down one by one. So probably, I mean, there are many distinguishing factors, but if we start with you mentioned about the kitchen and the food distribution. So I've known that even some of my friends who are not devotees, if they get admission in Australia and Melbourne, they know about the prasad distribution and visiting the temple. I think this is among the few temples in the world where you can get all three meals are available free, and it's opulent prasadam.
Yeah.
Is this something which is
Srila Prabhupada said, Prabhupada said, let every hungry man of Melbourne eat. And, if you want a successful temple, then have sumptuous prasadam for people, certainly at meal times. And, we have 7 offerings a day, so there's a lot of Maha prasadam as well. So nobody could say they're going hungry in our community. And if you feed people and you feed them nicely, they'll come back and they'll always give you donations. They'll give you support. So, we don't scrimp on prasadam distribution. Firstly, Prabhupada told us to do it. And secondly, we know that that makes your project successful.
So that is, the Prabhupada did talk about that. I think it was in Mayapur. And then that is something which, does it require a lot of energy to prepare that much prasad and to get the funds for it? Does that does that take a lot of the temple devotees or temple management's energy, or once the system is set up, it moves on its own reasonably well?
It's a culture. It's as I say, there's 120. We have about 3 or 4 devotees who are supported by the temple, and so they're like a full-time employee. They've got 40, 50 hours of engagement in a week. But then there's another 115 or so that are volunteers. And so, there's cutting up, there's cleaning, there's pot washing, there's the distribution of the prasadam. We've got a big roster. On the temple veranda, there's a pillar on the veranda, and on it, it's got a pin-up board. And on the pin-up board is the temple roster. And it's interesting. People will often come and visit the temple, and you'll catch them. They stand in front of the roster, and they'll sit there for 5 minutes going through the whole list. And I guess, it's intriguing for them to see how much is going on and how many people are engaged in all of those activities. But it's I guess in one sense it kind of goes on, but at the same time we have three kitchen managers at the moment, and you've got to keep an eye on things. There's program management, there's the restaurants that we're cooking for, plus the temple, and then there's project or events management where we have festivals, and there's a team, sometimes a team of 20 devotees will come and cook. At the moment, it's Lord Nrsingadeva's Appearance Day. And so the devotees, it's not, they're now planning for Lord Nrsingadeva's Appearance Day. So we've got devotees working on the decorations, there's the festival, the feast cooking team. They're already coordinating what they're going to cook, organising how much boga, how many people they're cooking for. There's a couple of youth groups that are working on plays to be presented on the occasion. So, once an event kicks in, then you've got teams of devotees who kind of, spring into action.
Yes, true. So roughly how much quantity of prasad do you have distribution free every meal or every week? Is there a tracking of that roughly?
Well, it depends on the day, but Saturday feast, 450 to 550 people. Sunday feast, 600 people. Saturday and Sunday lunchtime, 200 people. Sometimes breakfast, 100 people. During the week, it's a bit less. It might be 30 for breakfast, 50 for lunch, 50 for dinner. It does vary, but, they're fairly consistent figures.
Okay. I'm in Govardhan Eco Village right now here. And here also they have started Annakshetra, where free food is distributed for visitors. I think the dynamic is very different because this is a village and there is a lot of starvation and shortage. But I think the temple is in a very good location also. So you won't have, so what is, when we distribute free food, is it that we attract a particular kind of crowd by that? Do we try to control it? Because that's one challenge.
Yeah, see, you might not do something like this in Mumbai or, the eco village in Wada, because you might find yourself inundated by thousands of people. I don't know. But the temple in Melbourne is probably in one of the most expensive suburbs of Melbourne. Now it is. Okay. And it wasn't like that originally. This was a working class area. Port Melbourne, South Melbourne, Albert Park, Middle Park. This was where the stevedores used to live. So that it was pretty much, in the 50s and the 60s, and 70s, this was pretty much labourer class. But because it's so close to the city centre, it's an inner urban location. Then, from the 90s, 2000s onward, it's become very gentrified. So now it's judges, lawyers, merchant bankers, well-educated, very well-off neighbourhood.
That's something.
And although I have to say that devotees have moved here, there's when we first came here, there were not that many devotees, and in living in this area. But now there's probably a few hundred living around the local suburb, renting or have purchased houses. But, on the whole, we're living in a fairly affluent area. But having said that, we're listed with the local council, the local government, as an emergency food provider. And so we are known and recognised also for the fact that we do provide meals for people in our area who are in need, for whatever reason. But, predominantly we get, our congregation is 95% Indian families. So, that means well-educated, well-off people.
Okay. So even when the congregation will also invite others, they will also be somewhat similar kind of people. So that also
quite often, but we also have programs, our Bhakti Lounge outreach, One thing that's turned out to be quite popular is having these, more kirtan-oriented outreach for Western audience, or for what we call the Australian audience. We're
Yes,
not West, we're East.
Yeah.
we're East, not West. But that's, and we have a special class and kirtan, not in the temple room, but in the theatre for the Sunday program. And so kind of have two programs going. We have one which is primarily just catering for our Indian community. And, that's hundreds of people. And then we have a smaller program, but, 50 or 60 people, which is geared towards catering for the Australian, and that can be Vietnamese, Chinese, your Anglo Aussies and whatever, and that's quite. And then after the arti, there's a kirtan in the temple room, and that's very popular with everybody.
Yes,
and especially with the what we might call the Aussies.
That's interesting. I've seen that with respect to our temples outside, there is this challenge that we are attracting a good number of people from the Indian diaspora, but also attracting local people. Sometimes these two initiatives are separated, that we can have a separate center for Western outreach and separate center for more temple outreach. So you are saying that instead of having separate centers, you can have separate places within the same center. Is that what you're doing?
Yes, and it works.
Okay, so
it works. And what's happening now is, with that cultivation of the Australian audience, those devotees are now popping up doing volunteering also. So,
okay.
I've always encouraged a bit of blending. We know there's cultural differences and that presents challenges, but in my mind, it's better to have that melding, if you like. We don't merge, obviously, but we bring the two together, because the Indian community influences the local population, with their work ethic, their dharmic. The Indians tend to be the Dharma Rajas, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Right. But what the Aussies, or the non-Indians bring, is their enthusiasm for the philosophy, their enthusiasm for chanting Hare Krishna, and also their enthusiasm just to do things for Krishna. They like to do, and of course the Indian community also has that as well. But there are benefits from bringing everybody together. In the beginning, you might not do that, and that's why you have separate programs to cater for those differences. Because, a Western audience or an Australian audience can be quite challenged by Indian culture. It's different. People behave differently, and there's a fear of the unknown. But once you acclimatise and have people familiar with what's going on in the temple, they're easygoing. They get it, and they like it.
That's
I
interesting.
was talking to.
Just to complete this point, complement this point. Our Indian culture, I was also talking with Aniruddha Maharaj recently, and he was making this point that actually there are aspects of Indian culture which can also attract people. Because the Kirtan, you could say, the aspect of Indian culture. Even in his Festival of India, he has this wearing a sari or putting the gopi dots and decoration, and the food also, the music. So I think in America, there is Charu Prabhu, who uses the Festival of Colors, Holi, and he's attracting a
Yes.
huge number of people through that. So I guess
Yeah.
there are aspects of the culture which attract,
Oh,
but then there are
absolutely.
aspects of culture which cause hesitation also. So could you be a
Yeah.
little more
You know
specific
what?
about what causes hesitation?
It's different.
Yes.
It's different. It's not that anything in particular is, yeah, if it was anything, I think it's the way of speaking, which is a natural. But I'll tell you what my experience was. I started working with the Indian community because in the middle 80s, I was selling full sets of books. And what I discovered was that the Indian families were, they were so easy to get to buy a set of books, right? And they'd also become members, give donations, all of that. And but I was scared because I didn't know how. There wasn't a common shared platform of a common shared experience, right? So I talked to somebody, and I'd ask them, well, where are you from? And they'd say, well, I'm from Bangalore, right? Now, for me, even though I'd already been visiting India for maybe for 5 years or so, still, when somebody told me they came from Bangalore, I didn't know where the hell Bangalore was.
Okay.
I didn't know what Karnataka was. I didn't know what Kannada was, right? But now I have so many friends in India. Some of my Indian friends say, Aniruddha, you're more Indian than most Indians. I've been to more places in India than most Indians, right? And so it's fear of the unknown, and that's why acclimatizing people is the most important thing. But I'll tell you an experience I had the other day. I did a wedding, and a lot of the weddings I'm doing at the moment, it's with an Aussie. One of the couple is Aussie, and another of the couple is Indian. Very often, right?
Oh,
And when
okay.
we have these weddings, we've got Aussies dressing like Indians, and Indians dressing half like Aussies. You know what I mean? And
Okay.
so a blending of culture, and these aren't necessarily devotees. They're not, although they're very favourable. These are people who've been coming to the temple for many years, or one of the couple has been, or the family has been. But anyway, one of these weddings, after the wedding, we were cleaning up, and I was talking to a couple of girls who go to these Sunday programs. And here's an example. One of the girls is Chinese from Shenzhen, I think, and the other girl is an Aussie, but here's the kind of Aussie that you get. Her father is Polish and her mother is Filipino. Right.
Oh, okay.
And the father was a Jew, a Polish Jew, and this is the religious background, right? And the mother is a Catholic, right? But they met in Australia and got married and whatever. So often there's quite a mixture of culture. But anyway, one of the girls was asking me. She said, I just love coming to the temple. Can you explain to me why I like being here?
She's asking, huh? She's not able to articulate. That's
No,
amazing.
she knew. She was just sharing, how much she likes the temple. And I've had this very often. People say, when I come to the temple, there's an atmosphere here that I don't find anywhere else. And I feel, what she said to me? She says, I feel at home here. Right? So, that's a feeling. If because we are, bhakti is in many respects is an emotional experience, right? not just an intellectual or activity, but it is also a mellow that we taste, right? Rasayanam kata, isn't it? It's something that we relish. And so here's somebody who's been coming to the temple for a year or so, and it's something that she's just picked up. And of course, we all picked that up. I remember, going out on Sankirtan, and then after a long day of doing a collection or selling books, it was a relief just to drive in the back gate of the temple and park the car, and then you felt like you're in Vaikuntha. But people pick that up, whether they're whoever they are, whatever their background is, people pick it up.
Mm.
And they like it.
So what you're saying is, if I understand right, is that over a period, initially when you said that when they're mostly Indians they were easy to connect with, but it was difficult to have a common platform. But over the years, the temple and its atmosphere has become a common platform, not just for Indians, but for people from very diverse backgrounds. And even people who may not necessarily be committed bhakti practitioners in one sense, but even they like the atmosphere. They want to have their weddings over there, and they want to be just come there.
Yep. Yes. They do. People come and so they can enjoy it, relish it.
So when you earlier said that you have Saturday and Sunday, is one program for for local audience and another for Indians, or how is there a separation like that?
The Sunday program is more, the menu is more geared to the Western palate. And so it caters for both, whereas the Indian Saturday is traditionally when we have children's programs, and that's primarily, our congregational kids, and that's almost 100% Indian.
And even
so there is a bit of a we tailor it for the various audiences.
Okay. And when you have the various programs, you said they try to bring the Indian and the local audiences also together. So is it once they have started practicing bhakti to a particular extent, then that happens naturally? Or
it just
are there is because, say, with respect to Indian audiences, often there have been quite a few courses designed, like there is the Essence of Bhagavad Gita course or 6-session Gita course or whatever. Are there some courses designed for Western outreach also to cultivate people? Or how do we decide that now these local audiences are mature enough to blend with the Indian audiences? It's an individual decision based on the person, knowing the person, or is it like there's some objective criteria?
That's a good question. And those girls were asking me, can we enroll in a Bhakti Shastri course? What do you have to do? So when people are interested, they'll naturally want to join and participate. And what we generally tend to do is create courses for each of the different audiences, because there is a different language spoken and there's a different experience. A lot of these Australian devotees are single, or they're younger single people. But whereas the Indian community, whilst we do have young single men and women, most of them are married. They go to college. Once they've got their degrees, then the parents generally put quite a bit of pressure on them to get married. And unless and the majority of them, unless they're naturally inclined brahmacharis, of which, there is a small percentage, rare, there's a rare few, but there are. And of course, we cater for those in the ashram. But usually, they go through that student life, married life. There'll be a period of time when they're a single couple with no kids, but pretty quickly the kids will come along. And so that's a particular group that we can cater for and cultivate. Whereas the Australian audience, we might have separate training for them, even though it might be a Bhakti Shastri, just because of the slightly different, setting that they live in. But sometimes it's always going to be mixed. It's not always, okay, you can only go here. No, you can't do that. That's what kind of happens naturally. But by the same token, there's also a natural blending or a natural mixing. And people are pretty comfortable with that.
Okay. And during the 80s, I think during Prabhupada's times, our movement was very successful in the Western world. And in Australia also, we were having literally minting devotees. And then I think the 80s, we had a significant, we could say a little of destabilization or turbulence. And you said that you took the leadership in the 90s, around 90. So were there some things you specifically had to do to shift the focus?
Yes.
Or the focus? Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Couple of things that we did. The main one was congregational development. We were maintaining the temple by selling painting, selling paraphernalia and some books. That was changing because previously there was a large pool of single men and women that could either sell books or sell paraphernalia, and the temple could support them. But as the householder community grew, then the family responsibilities expanded, and then the temple wasn't able to support all of those devotees to the level that they needed to educate their children and to maintain their household requirements. So a lot of those devotees got jobs, and so the pool of manpower that was available to do fundraising for the temple diminished. When I became the temple president, then for the 90s, for me, it was a focus on community development within the Indian community. And every week I'd be doing 1 or 2 or 3 home programs in a night. Mm. I remember I'd been doing home programs for a year and nobody was getting initiated. And I was thinking, what's wrong with these people? Don't they get the message? Why aren't they waking up? But then gradually, people stopped smoking, or they stopped eating meat, or they started chanting 16 rounds. Jayapataka Maharaj used to visit at least 2 times a year in those days. So he was encouraging, congregational development, and we were building our congregation. So 90s was congregational development, and devotees were getting initiated. They were doing services in the temple, and they were contributing. We had a mailing list from the 80s. Actually, we had a mailing list, and so we were collecting names and addresses. And what we discovered was when our newsletter went out, the more people it went out to, the more people came to our festivals. And of course, the more people that came to the festivals or to the programs, more donations went into hundi, right? Mm. So we were cultivating, and we were feeding them. Whenever they came to the temple, give them sumptuous prasadam, right? In the 2000s, then we built on that, but we also then introduced educational programs, our Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, later on. And so there was a lot of training also of the devotees, at least philosophically. So that training consolidated the existing devotees. So you could say 90s congregational development, and then the 20s was educational training and education, establishing that. We have a board of education that now, oversees the management of all of our bhakti training of teachers and keeping track of all of the devotees, and importantly, keeping track of all of the devotees that are preparing to take shelter. We require them to do the Founderacharya course. They have to read the Lilamrita and pass an exam on the Lilamrita, and they have to have done the disciple course before they get recommended for initiation. So keeping track of all of that. So, 20s was building on the congregational development and building education into the devotional activities of the community. At the same time, in the 90s, we were doing catering. We started doing catering at big festivals, big music festivals. So that started bringing in, that helped us connect with people, but plus also brought in an income. So that way we sort of changed from a Sankirtan, if you like, what we used to call Sankirtan, focused effort, which was basically fundraising by the temple devotees. We broadened the community so that the funds came from our members and from our prasadam distribution.
Oh, okay.
And now we've supplemented that. So, in the 20s also, and certainly in the teens, the twin teens, I guess you could call them, we've done things like we do a lot of weddings, and that brings in income. We've opened up another restaurant, and restaurants are really good for hard work, but when you get the formula and the right people, very profitable, and of course influential. It's arguable, about 5 years ago, 2015, I think it was, a bit longer, 6 or 7 years ago, the state government gave us $500,000 to renovate our kitchen. And, with the support of the local council as well. And that's in good part because of the prasadam that we've distributed over the years at our restaurant in the city, which is a cheap meal for students and unemployed and pensioners. And, prasadam from the temple, Food for Life, free food distribution. So this is why prasadam distribution is so important, because, the end result of that might not manifest in until a decade or even a couple of decades away.
Wow.
You know
That
what I mean?
requires a lot of patience and confidence in one sense to persevere in that direction. So just to clarify,
Prabhupada told us to do that.
The restaurant
Prabhupada
also
told us to do that.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Prabhupada told us to do, that's what Prabhupada wanted us to do. This is not new. Prabhupada was encouraging Mrs. Agarwal, after he'd been in Buffalo, in the years after, Prabhupada was writing letters to her and saying, open up a restaurant. I'll give you the recipes. People will come. So, prasadam distribution in restaurants was not something new. It's not something new. It's something that Prabhupada actually recommended, and something that we in ISKCON don't pursue enough. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no. Actually, I who interrupted you. So the thing is that with respect to food distribution, you said that the local government also offered some support. So do they not? I mean, the restaurant, does it come under a commercial venture or it's a charitable venture? Because won't they have those differences, and you could have two separate channels for those?
There's three levels of government in Australia. There's federal, there's state, and there's local.
Okay.
An emphasis throughout the whole of the three tiers of government in Australia, there's been an emphasis on multiculturalism.
Yes.
And because Australia is really a kitchery, when it comes to the various communities that exist within the Australia, the umbrella, if you like, of Australia. And so the temple is recognised as an institution that facilitates and aids the multicultural fabric, the weave of the multicultural fabric in the country, right?
Okay.
And this came out very much in COVID too. The leaders, the political leaders realised that the religious leaders and the religious leadership is important to the community because people were under so much stress, right? And that's one of the reasons why they were happy to give us funding. So, because they appreciated and valued our contribution to the multicultural community, if you like, then they were happy to give us funds. And even though the restaurant, our paying restaurants are fueled, if you like, or supported by the prasadam that we cook at the temple, right? Still, they could see that we were feeding students at a cheaper rate, unemployed people, pensioners, people who are basically being supported by the government in their old age. So they didn't mind that we were making money. What they saw and what we emphasised was the positive things that we were doing for the community, and they're happy to support us. And because we've distributed so much prasadam over the decades, then there's just an understanding that's what the Hare Krishnas do. In fact, I've had devotees complain to me. They've gone to a country in the world, or a city in the world, and they've told me, I was looking for the Hare Krishna restaurant, but I couldn't find it.
Okay.
They think, because there's been Hare Krishna restaurants in all of the capital cities of Australia, they think when they go to, another city in the world, where's the Hare Krishna restaurant? There's got to be one somewhere.
Okay. It's become like iconically associated with ISKCON now to some extent.
Certainly for the Aussies.
Okay.
Yeah, for the Australians, definitely. I know, Pragosh.
Yes.
Have you interviewed Pragosh? You must have.
No, I'm not yet, but I've interacted with him. He's wonderful.
Yeah.
Email and other places. Yes.
Pragosh they have restaurants in his city. And
talking about London or Scotland?
Well, London, yes, Soho, right?
Yeah, Soho is a beautiful restaurant. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, but also Dublin. Is it Dublin or Belfast? Where is?
Okay.
But it's a restaurant, the city where he lives, and prasadam distribution is so powerful.
Oh, okay, makes sense. Yeah, I've seen. Yeah. So basically, you said that is influential earlier. That is, prasadam outreach is influential in terms of building bridges with the government and with the other social levels of social influential bodies. So when you talked about multiculturalism, does that also mean that you actively interface with do you present yourself as a Hindu group or Hare Krishna within Hindu or just Hare Krishna?
Oh,
how do you position yourself?
Good question. Our communications person is part of multi-faith community, groups in Melbourne. And he's known as a representative of the Hindu faith. In fact, here's something interesting. When the Hindu community has a gathering, right, for whatever the occasion might be, they get Bhakta to speak because they recognize that ISKCON has the most logical and consistent presentation of Hindu philosophy, of Vedic tradition, right? So we are representative of and integral to the Hindu community, and the Hindu community's interface with local and state and federal government. So yeah, we present ourselves as Hindus, but we don't make I'll tell you a funny story. There was a gentleman who lived in Albert Park, and he was the kind of person that I would see, and we would just be friendly to each other and say hello every time we met. And I could sense that he was Muslim. I didn't know why, but different reasons. Just his demeanour and how he looked. And just one of those people. I don't know if you have this experience, but I've had this experience often, where you go to an event or you're walking around the streets and you see somebody, and whenever you see them, you're just friendly with each other. It's just like a natural rapport. So it was like that with this fellow. And then one day he came up to me. I was walking, he was walking, and he came up to me and he said, "Why did you become a Hindu?" and I said, "When I joined the Hare Krishnas, I didn't know that I was becoming a Hindu. I was becoming a Hare Krishna, not a Hindu." And, I think, and even Prabhupada said, we are Hindus, right? But then on other occasions says we're not Hindus, right? And of course, you have to understand the context in which Prabhupada was presenting either not a Hindu or yes, we are Hindus, right? And of course, context tells you everything. Prabhupada was, in the context of we're not Hindus, God's not a Christian, a Hindu, or a Buddhist. He's purely on the spiritual platform. And when we're engaged in the process of bhakti, then we're automatically elevated to the spiritual platform, which can't really be designated by a material, label. Right? But then on the other hand, Prabhupada was also not. He understood and preached the transcendence of bhakti, but at the same time, he understood, we're Hindus. We're not Muslims, that's for sure. We're certainly not Christians. And we're not Buddhists either. So what are we? We accept the fact that we fall within the Hindu diaspora, I suppose, But by the same token, that doesn't mean we're defined by it. We happen to be, part of it, but also transcendental to it, if you like. Yeah,
That's
and
interesting.
that way,
it's very nicely what you put it is that context is so important, because otherwise, if we don't explain the context, we can come off as quite opportunistic. That when we need the Hindu community, we'll say, yes, we are Hindus. And other times we will say we are not Hindus. But once we explain the context, like what you said at the start, that we have a very systematic, I could say systematic theological presentation. And also even, I could say in systematic set of practices of what we are meant to do. Otherwise, it's a very hazy what Hinduism is.
Yes, and that's so important, that not only do we have a consistent theology, which is logical, it has its own internal logic, and so it's fully recognizable and consistent, logical and consistent. But then, as you say, we put it into practice. We put our money where our mouth is, and that earns us great respect. So we certainly don't say we're not Hindus. Boy, we're living in a society where that's to our benefit, actually.
That's
So,
to our benefit.
Of course it is, and one of the problems. Well, I mean, not that I'm not immune to this problem, but we have a little bit of knowledge, right, and then we apply it inappropriately. That's why I said context is so important. And maturity means understanding the broader application of some of these principles and then knowing when to apply it and not blindly or robotically or in a way that's going to alienate people. But you see, Prabhupada didn't do that. Prabhupada was strong in his convictions, thoroughly articulate in being in his presentation, and could convince almost anybody of anything, almost, right? But knew how to apply it. That was, Prabhupada's. There's that saying that Prabhupada, in the 70s, he was the only adult in the movement. Even though most everybody was over 18, Prabhupada was the only adult.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very interesting because we need to, if we're going to influence society, and which is what we want to do, and Prabhupada wanted us to do it, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted us to do it, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted us to do it. I was listening to a lecture the other day, and Prabhupada was saying how before Bhaktisiddhanta, and probably more before Bhaktivinoda, Vaishnavas were ascetics and renunciates and retreated pretty much from, traditionally retreated. And even Prabhupada said, even in imitation, interestingly, he said that. But then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur promoted, the use of technology, use motor cars, go to the cities, live in the cities, right, which is almost the antithesis of a yoga practice, right? Yeah, that's what Prabhupada, that was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's vision. I'd say it really started with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur really put that in action. Bhaktisiddhanta launched missions to Europe because his vision was global, right, or even universal, but certainly let's start off with global. That didn't fructify in the way that he envisaged. And there's that famous conversation where he told Prabhupada, whenever you get money, print books. And, he was prescient and he could see the demise of the Gaudiya Math. And he said to Prabhupada, better to take the marble off the walls and print books, sell it and print books than have disciples squabble over which room they're going to be in.
Yes.
So that vision is quite a mature vision. And then how to apply that, and maintain the spiritual principles, but at the same time engage with the material energy, if you like, in its entirety, in its fullness almost, and with things that ordinarily could be very, very dangerous and could see the demise of your spiritual life. But Rupa Goswami says, renouncing things that can be used in Krishna's service is Phalgu Vairagya, right? So, getting that balance, and that requires a lot of maturity of understanding the essence, the core, and then applying it, to affect others realistically. It does require quite a bit of maturity on the part of the devotees. And so that's why, presenting ourselves as part of the Hindu community, as a responsible, sector of that community, and, grow it so that eventually what happens is we influence people. And very often not just by what we say, but also by what we do. And that comes with maturity.
Okay. So what you're trying to say is that we have to, with maturity, we will basically understand how to present how to fulfill Prabhupada's purpose, and not just take one quote here or one statement there and think that just by quoting this, I'm being faithful to Prabhupada. Am I getting you right? What you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And, there are those who say, secular education is slaughterhouse education, right? And Prabhupada did say that, right? But there are other statements where Prabhupada values secular education, psychology, philosophy, physics, and, says we can use these things, right? So, to get the balance requires maturity that comes from, studying Prabhupada's life and how he applied, our philosophy effectively, and growing up ourselves too, with that understanding and through experience. Maturity is sometimes hard earned.
That is true. And when we continuing this theme of integrating with, on one side, we identify ourselves as, we could say, we identify ourselves as Hindus, but at the same time, we can also say that it's not that we identify with everything within Hinduism. We are like a specific tradition with specific practices, specific theologies. So does this also become easier? I'm just linking the second point with respect to education, that when there is greater education, then we can have a more nuanced understanding and presentation. But without proper education, it becomes very easy to have a 1-0 kind of thing. We are Hindus or we are not Hindus.
No. Well, our philosophy is achincha beta abeta tattva. So we are, but we're not. And you can apply that. You can apply this achincha beta abeta tattva. You can apply that in so many circumstances and situations. If we're anything, okay, we are Gaudiyas and Gaudiya Vaishnavas, which means we embrace Lord Chaitanya's mission. We're followers of Lord Chaitanya. And what was his mission? It was Sankirtan, And Sankirtan for us means book distribution and Harinam and also festivals with Prasadam distribution. This is what Prabhupada promoted. And we want to, the focus of our educational programs is to make people familiar with our basic philosophy, with the Bhagavad Gita, with the Upanishad, with the nectar of instruction, with the nectar of devotion. That's your basic Bhakti Shastri, right? And what we're adding to the Bhakti Shastri is a deity worship component as well. We want to make, and Prabhupada recommended that in his early descriptions of Bhakti Shastri, that it should also teach people what deity worship is. Because, and it's very interesting, Prabhupada talks about the Bhagavat Vidhi and the Pantrarika Vidhi, and so it's interesting that something I discovered recently, Narada Muni is the source of the Pancharatra Pradeep, if you like. He taught, in the Narayan Kuvacha, in the sixth chapter of the Bhagavatam, in the prayers that are offered, it mentions that one prays to Narada Muni to be relieved from offences for deity worship. Very interesting. But Narada Muni is also famous for Bhajaya, Radhika Ramana Namane, right? What is it? Narada Muni Bhajaya Veena Radhika Ramana Namane, right?
Yes.
So he's also a Sankirtan Walla, right? He's the patron saint of deity worship, but he's also he travels throughout the whole of the creation material and spiritual world on the basis of his chanting Hare Krishna effectively, right? So we want to train devotees in these aspects of spiritual life, but also we need them to go out and do Harinam, because that's what Lord Chaitanya wanted and Prabhupada wanted, to broaden Krishna consciousness, to broaden people's exposure to Krishna consciousness, and to create their agyata, to create their sukriti for, their agyata sukriti, their pious sukriti, real pious, bhakti sukriti, and book distribution, right? So, if we're to train devotees in the yoga of, Hare Krishna yoga practice, then, and this is what makes us different from the other Hindu traditions, is we are proselytizers. And that's what's scary in one sense about ISKCON and Hare Krishna, is, it means, oh no, I've got to go out and chant Hare Krishna. And I've got to be prepared to, actively propagate the mission, if you like. That's really what we if we understand Prabhupada, that's what we should be committed to. If we understand Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we know, as Vaisheshika said, this is our family business, right? Book distribution, Harinam, festivals that bring people in, and of course also our behavior, the way that we interact within the community is super important, so that, when people meet the Hare Krishnas, they get something. They may not get, they feel something, like that girl that I was talking to the other day. She comes to the temple and she got something. She might, at that point, she's not able to articulate it, but when people meet the devotees, we want them to feel the presence, to feel the impact, and in a positive way, as positive as we can make it, either through our philosophy or through our behavior or through the prasadam, or, when people see the deity worship, they go, like, whoa, it really knocks them up, bowls them over, basically. But, the influence is almost invisible. It's there. It's palpable, but not quite. You can't put your finger on it because it's actually spiritual. It's bhakti. That's what we want to hit people with, if we're going to hit them with anything.
Hey, that's a striking way of putting it. Yes. So overall,
yes. If we're going to hit anybody, then that's how we should do it.
Yeah. It's sometimes, if we are not cautious in our attempts to try to draw people toward what we consider the pure or core Krishna consciousness, we may actually alienate people also if you're not careful. And especially with respect to...
It depends on how pure you are.
Yeah, that is true. I think purity and sensitivity also matters. One, like the multiculturalism aspect, one aspect is that people are open to various cultures, but they also become very closed if you criticize anybody else. It's more like you present what you are doing. If it interests me, I'm happy to explore it further. So multiculturalism in that sense.
Don't criticize others too. Prabhupada could do it. He was much older and, obviously just so much more potent. But our influence is going to be in working cooperatively with others.
Okay. That is, so this is so is it because the times have changed, or is it because we were more like a rebel movement earlier and now we have become more integrated with mainstream society, or what is the reason?
That's a really good... There's a gentleman who was the premier of the state. That's the top. That's like the chief minister of Victoria, our state. and he often comes to Janmashtami and gives a presentation, and then encourages everybody to chant Hare Krishna. And he knows the full mantra. He gets people to chant, and people cheer him and appreciate his presence. And he's a what we call a true blue Aussie, which means he's an authentic Australian. If the white Caucasian Anglo Aussies are the original, of course, the original Australians are actually the original Indigenous people. But that's another thing. But he told us, we've had numerous conversations, and he's told us, he said, you guys have changed. You've changed. You're not the fanatics that you used to be. Right? And really that's, this is a Madhyamadikari. A Madhyamadikari is quite relaxed with others. I think so. An advanced Madhyamadikari is strict with himself, right? But is quite flexible and relaxed with others. And even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, one shouldn't disturb the minds of the ignorant, but one should encourage them in acts of devotion, right? So, sure, we know that people are not Paramahamsas or they're not, they might not even be vegetarian. But we say, come. I mean, Prabhupada said, let every hungry man of Melbourne come and eat, right? And it's very interesting, actually, just on this, reminds me, on this point, Prabhupada was challenged by the social services minister that he was talking to at the time. And he said to Prabhupada, what happens if that person comes to steal from you? And you know what Prabhupada said? Doesn't matter. Even if he's coming as a thief, still feed him, right? Prabhupada said, if you keep feeding him, he'll lose his desire to steal, right? So, we can't be we should be very strict on ourselves, but we can be lenient with others. Then we gain their trust, actually. And so, think of Jayananda. Jayananda was a very strict and active and capable devotee. But then he used to, when he was building a Rath cart, he used to assemble he'd have a monkey army helping him, build a Rath cart. And some of those people weren't very qualified. But because of his association, because of his friendship, because of his encouragement, he'd convert those disqualified people and make them into qualified people. So you can see that with Prabhupada. That's Prabhupada's mood. He attracted a lot of people. Even people that he was living with, they had meat in their fridge, right? They were taking intoxicants. But yet Prabhupada, pragmatically had to work. He had to work with what he had been given by Krishna, and that's what he did.
So this is an interesting way of looking at it, that if we are Madhyamadikaris, so in one sense, our commitment to the mission is seen not just so much by how rigidly we follow, but how also we make it easier for others to follow. Not easier in terms of compromising or watering down, just understanding where they are coming from, anticipating the difficulties they will have, and then maybe paving a path for them. So it's very important. Sorry, go ahead.
And being patient. Being patient. And also, there are certain levels of association that we don't tolerate and can't, live with. So it's not that, we're foolish about our association. We're not. But, if we're predominantly giving our association, in a temple environment or in a program environment, we encourage anybody to participate. And we know that because we're so tightly bunched together, Prabhupada gives the example of the sticks. One little stick can be easily broken. Bunch of sticks, impossible. So long as we stay tightly bunched up together, that's our morning program, our evening programs, our acceptance of prasadam, our sadhana, if you like, then we're able to, and within that context, we're able to bring people into the association of the devotees. Then we encourage almost anybody to participate, so long as they're not disruptive of what we do.
That's beautifully put. So here you're talking about unity in terms of you're comparing that united with what exactly? With we as a movement staying united, or?
Yes, but I'm in terms of our sangha. What's our sangha? It's a group of devotees that come together to chant Hare Krishna, to hear the philosophy, to worship the deity, to share our sadhana, right? Our Krishna consciousness, basically. And we do that. That's a closed environment. We don't let just any old, come into that environment. But that's where we build, that's where we nourish our Krishna consciousness. And so long as we're maintaining that nourishment of our Krishna consciousness, then we've got excess. We'll have excess. We'll have excess to give to others. And so, by ourselves, a little stick, quite easily broken. But put a bunch of sticks together that are engaging in that sadhana practice and that sadhana program that Prabhupada gave us. Deity worship, chanting japa, worship of the spiritual master, living in you'll find that Prabhupada incorporated the Panchanga Bhakti, that's described by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. You find those activities, association with the devotees, kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, hearing the Bhagavatam, worshipping the deity, and all of that really makes a sacred place. You find that's all integrated within ISKCON's program, really. And if we've got that, then it's easy to attract others into that environment.
That's nice. I think what you earlier talked about, the environment or the atmosphere, that's what that makes a key difference in terms of helping people to navigate that journey.
Yeah, and looking after people too, really looking after them.
So making them feel comfortable. Do you mean some kind of a mentoring system, or just having loving relationships, or what do you mean by that? Or some devotee cares programs?
Feeding them.
Okay, that's important.
Making them feel, making them feel welcome. Smiling at people. And it does happen. I know in my early years, I used to scowl at the people that came to the Sunday feast, thinking, what's wrong with these people? Why won't they surrender to Krishna like me, Why can't they, why don't they get it? And I realized at one point, I thought those people, well, I was like them at one point, but I got the mercy of the devotees. So, we shouldn't think that people coming to the temple or people attending our programs or going to the restaurants or whatever are a burden, or that somehow they're exploiting us or whatever. But rather we should know that the more they associate with the devotees, the more they take prasadam, the more they hear the holy name, the more they'll change. They have to. It's what happens.
Okay.
And even if they are fallen, just wait. Be patient.
And when we talk about this as you said, patience and waiting for them to take it up at their pace. Do we also need some kind of training for the devotees who are taking care of this? Because a lot will, because as a leader, you may have particular vision, but it may be difficult for you to individually spend time with everyone. So how do you create that culture of being patient, being understanding? Are there some special training programs or something like that, or it's just more osmotic, which happens by people observing each other?
Well, I think you can definitely train people, but at the same time, also it is by association.
Okay.
And that's where the Bhakti Shastri and, even vocational training is important within ISKCON. Teaching the devotees your basic kitchen standards, for example, basic Vaishnav culture, feed others before you feed yourself. Having a mood of service, understanding Lord Chaitanya's philosophy and applying Trinada P, that some very basic, philosophical planks in our platform. But yes, we generally train the devotees how to cook and how to serve, a lot of it by association, but also in our training. If we were really, 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 highly developed, and it's where we want to go, but we're not quite there yet, we would have courses on these.
Okay.
Identifying, here's one thing you can do. Identify what makes your community unique. And certainly in our community, it's prasadam distribution. But of course, I think that's ISKCON. That's what a temple is for. What's the end result of a service at a Hare Krishna temple? What's the end result? When I think about it, what's the end result of an aarti or of the morning program? What's the end result after you've done an aarti and everything's washed up and cleaned up? What have you got? You've got prasadam.
Okay. I was thinking more in terms of what virtues will be developed by doing that.
But just think about it. We dress the deities. We do offerings, and then you've got Mahaprasadam, and so prasadam distribution is in my mind an extension of deity worship. And then what do you do with that prasadam? You just go off into the corner and eat it all yourself? Well, you don't. You give it to others. Huh? So that's a culture that should exist throughout ISKCON. There's that famous letter from Srila Prabhupada where he said, you should have 2 or 3 cooks just waiting for somebody to turn up. When they turn up, they start cooking the puris, right? And so there's hot puris for those people, and there's already sabji in the pot that's been kept warm, right? And so then, when somebody turns up, there's somebody to feed them straight away. So that's our basic Vaishnava culture. And devotees learn that. They learn it. In the beginning, sometimes they go down to the kitchen just to see what's being offered because that's what they're interested in, is the prasad, at a neophyte level, right? At a very neophyte level, you come to the temple and you're thinking, ooh, I wonder what's being offered to Krishna today. when you're thinking, what am I going to eat today? But that mood, a devotee will advance from that fairly quickly to understanding, well, hopefully, by good association, they'll understand, well, actually, prasadam's not really just for me to eat. It's to be distributed to others as well. And yes, so having training programs that teach people these things systematically is a very good idea. We don't have it at the moment. We have basic training for, kitchen hands and cooks and the like, and that's part of it. But it certainly should be part of, your Vaishnava etiquette training. Yeah. And it's cleanliness too. When you think about cleanliness, it's cleanliness, this idea that I'm doing this for Krishna, I'm not doing it for myself. That's considered to be pure-hearted. And offering bhoga, getting the prasadam, distributing it, that's pure-hearted. Because you're not thinking, oh, how many puris can I have? And, how many bits of paneer am I going to get? And what about the burfi? I've got to get a burfi. We stop thinking about that and we distribute it to others, knowing how purifying it is. And we get enthusiasm actually and satisfaction from feeding others rather than feeding ourselves.
Yes, Prabhu, that's beautiful. So it seems that overall, prasadam is a very important part of our culture, and it's not just in the beginning, but it's throughout. But as we grow, then it's not so. Our own focus shifts, and a service attitude comes in more, where we see prasad not just something which is enjoyable for ourselves, but it is a way for offering to others and connecting others, and giving others example of as a glimpses of spiritual joy, spiritual pleasure.
Yeah. Yes. Look at 22nd Avenue. Who was the first cook in ISKCON?
Prabhupada himself.
That's right. Who cleaned up afterwards?
Yeah.
Prabhupada. Right? He did it all first. But, he encouraged the boys. Here, eat 10 chapatis.
True. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's our culture.
Yes, bro. So, through this has been a very multifaceted and illuminating talk. Generally, toward the end, I try to summarize what we discussed. Would you like to add some concluding points now, or should I summarize and then you can add something at the end if you want?
Well, we've talked about prasadam a lot, I guess. Of course, the other prasadam is books, book distribution. That's kind of an essential element. Harinam is also prasadam. Just prasadam, prasadam in a sense, it's kripa or mercy, right? And if we're to fully embrace Lord Chaitanya's mission, and then by default, Bhakti Vinod Thakur's vision, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and our Srila Prabhupada's vision, then prasadam it manifests in books especially. And we know that by how much Srila Prabhupada put time into distributing books, writing and publishing and distributing. And the same goes with the Harinam. The books are the Brihat Mridanga. And this is all prasadam, if you like. It's Krishna's mercy. So, ISKCON really means distributing those things. And a community development, in my mind, is, developing a community that is a preaching community and that distributes these things, depending on a person's capacity. If you're a mother or a family person, then, you can't give up looking after your children and just run off and do book distribution. That's irresponsible. or you may not have the capacity, but there's some way that all of us can fit into that system, or the machinery, if you like, of distributing prasadam for everybody, whether it's a holy name, whether it's books, or whether it's some form of, offering, whatever the offering is. So yeah, it's really is part of our culture. It's I guess it's Lord Chaitanya's mission and Prabhupada's mission, something that we should all meditate on, but then go and do. It's not something that Prabhupada says we're not armchair philosophers. We practically apply the philosophy, and that's challenging. That really is challenging, but makes us wholesome and pure and effective too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. True.
Okay, that's about it, I think, from me today, anyway, tonight.
Thank you, Prabhu. It was, I'll just try to quickly summarize. We started by discussing about your journey and how you took up the leadership in Melbourne, and broadly speaking, with the food distribution as a starting point, where we are able to attract a lot of people. And of course, Prabhupada wanted it. Exactly how to replicate it in various places will vary. But with that, we are able to, especially when you are in a good location, you can attract quality people. And then we take them on the journey systematically. So 2-3 important points we discussed was about how both there was this historical shift when focused on connecting with Indian people in the 80s and the 90s. And then they became a prominent part of the congregation. At the same time, there's also endeavors to connect with local people, and those are also over a period of time bearing fruit. And once both are trained, then bringing the two streams together, it works out naturally and without much conflicts. And he also discussed about Hinduism and how we need to, we have to understand the context in which Prabhupada has made statements. Otherwise, we may end up alienating people who could be our allies. And within the multicultural ethos, we get a place on the table very relatively easily. And even the government support, like you talked about, the support provided by the government for various food outreach initiatives. But at the same time, the critical approach, if we criticize too much, then we may end up alienating people. Prabhupada could do it at his, because of his spiritual nature, because of the kind of times he was in today's world. The point is not so much quoting Prabhupada or using quoting Prabhupada's critical statements as fulfilling Prabhupada's purpose. And that means we need maturity. We also need Shastric study and education like Bhakti Shastri and others, which will help us appreciate that our position is not 1 or 0. It is more of Achintya Bheda Bhed. And which aspect to emphasize when Bhed or Abhed, that requires maturity to understand. And the last one, and that idea that prasad distribution is actually an extension of deity worship. That's such a beautiful devotional meditation. We see that in Chaitanya Charitamrita constantly. After deities are worshipped, Jagannath is worshipped, then the bhoga is distributed. So that gives, it's not just humanitarian outreach, although the world may appreciate it from that perspective. For us, it is an integral part of bhakti culture. And then ultimately, the prasad that we are offering is not just the food. The food is a very important way of offering love and care. But then the books, the message, everything in one sense is the mercy of the Lord. And we are meant to be channels in sharing that mercy with as many people as we possibly can. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Would you like to add any more things? I know we discussed many more points, but just this is a quick summary.
Yeah, and if you perfect that and that becomes your sadhana, then that also is, we're in a unique situation where we establish our relationship with Lord Chaitanya, but at the same time, within the Sankirtan mission, we're establishing our relationship with Radha and Krishna as well. And, it's in that mood of service. And of course, the mood of service in the Sankirtan movement is holy name and, distribution of prasadam. But that also qualifies us and purifies us to the point where we can also then have our relationship with Radha and Krishna revealed. This is what Prabhupada taught. And so, there's a tendency sometimes to think of these activities as just, mundane book distribution. Even people criticize the Hare Krishnas. Oh, you Hare Krishnas, you only just sell books. And that's the external platform. But actually, we're not selling books. We're establishing our relationship with Radha and Krishna. If we enter into the mood, the mood of service. So this is the unique offering of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is we connect with Krishna in his manifestation as the Panchatattva and, the engagement of the Sankirtan movement. And at the same time, while we're doing that, we're also purifying and developing our understanding of our relationship with Radha and Krishna. That's pretty amazing when you think about it, that we get that connection simultaneously. So we serve the Guru. Serving the Guru, we develop our relationship with Lord Chaitanya. At the same time, we also develop our relationship with Radha and Krishna. So, Prabhupada's really giving us a pretty amazing opportunity. If all we have to do is take advantage of it.
Yes, true. Thank you very much for your time in
Hare
association.
Krishna.
I look forward
My
to
pleasure.
having more of your associations soon in future, whenever I visit
You're
Australia
welcome.
or when you come to Govardhan Eco Village or in India in general. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Close to Prabhupada.
Jai Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.